So what is the NEI? The NEI is a national emissions dataset compiled and maintained by EPA. The NEI stands for the National Emissions Inventory. The NEI covers all areas of the U.S. It is a national database of air emissions information with input from state, local, and tribal air pollution control agencies. EPA also does some emission estimates and submits them, and they also gather data from some sources that go into the NEI, such as airport emissions. There are several uses for NEI data, which include air dispersion modeling, regional strategy development, setting regulations, risk assessments, and tracking trends in emissions over time. So if anyone's looking for emissions data, the NEI is where they go. So the EIS, which stands for the Emissions Inventory System, is the actual database which holds the emissions data, and that data is used to create the NEI. The EIS can contain annual, monthly, or daily emissions for sources. To see the EIS data, you have to register for an EIS Gateway account, and then you get a username and a password, and you can download data from the EIS Gateway site. This is where the data that we gave you to import into your TEISS projects came from, is the EIS Gateway system. In contrast, the National Emissions Inventory is a specific year snapshot in time of emissions data received. So if you're looking at 2017 NEI data, that's only the data from 2017, whereas the EIS system has data from all the years in that inventory included. The NEI data are shared with the public, so EPA compiles the data and distributes it to the public via their website, and that website is not password protected. It's always on an annual reporting cycle for large sources. For smaller sources, it's on a 3-year reporting cycle. So for non-point sources, non-road sources, and on-road sources, it's on a 3-year reporting cycle. So the most current of that tri-annual inventory is the 2017 data, and that's the data that you're going to be importing into your TEISS project. And the state, local, tribal data submitted has priority in the EPA selection of what to include in the NEI. In most cases, EPA estimates are only used in the NEI if data are missing from the state, local, tribal data file. So in these cases, EPA augments the data for the NEI general purpose release data, the GPR data. And the GPR data is what we provide you to import into your TEISS project. An example of this is that if a state data file includes PM10 emissions, but not PM2.5, EPA estimates the PM2.5 emissions based on the PM10 emissions and adds those emissions to the NEI GPR data. Another example is that if a state data file does not contain certain non-point sources, for example, residential heating emissions, EPA estimates those emissions based on default activity data, like perhaps they get from a federal website, and adds those emissions to the NEI GPR data. Next, we'll talk about who has access to EIS and NEI. So, state, local, tribal users of the EIS gateway, meaning they have an account, a username, and a password, have access to their data and any national public releases, such as the GPR data. But a state cannot access a tribe's data or perhaps another state's data file unless the state's authorize or the tribe authorizes that state to access that account. So if you wanted to get NEI data, you could ask the state to give you authorization for you to get that data, and you could work with EPA to do that. The general public does not have access to the NEI data until the data are released on a public website. So next we're going to talk about two different types of NEI data that we have already touched on. These are two types of data sets that you can import into your TEISS project to see the county level emissions. The first is the state data files. Now these are the data files that the state submitted to the NEI. In order to access these files, you need to first register for an EIS Gateway account. Then you need to work with EPA, and the contact we have there is Sally Dombrowski, and she can help you establish an agreement with the state agency to access their data. And most state agencies that we've worked with, they don't have any problems sharing their data with the tribes. But some states want the tribe to share their data with them also before they give them access to their data. The state data files are already in the EIS XML format, and that's the format they need to be to import into TEISS. The second set of data files is the GPR data files, and that stands for the General Purpose Release. And these files are a compilation of data submitted to the NEI by the state agency and the local agencies, and it also includes the EPA estimated data. So if you have an EIS Gateway account, since this is a public release by EPA, you can access that GPR data. However, it's not in a format that can be imported into TEISS directly. So what we did was we developed a database that can make that conversion. So the data that we're giving you to import into your TEISS project is the GPR data converted to the EIS XML format for importing into TEISS. And the next few slides will discuss the difference between these two data sets, and although we're using the GPR data for this training, if you want to use the state data files in the future, we'll give you some insight into that. State data files is the first one we'll talk about. And there are advantages and disadvantages to using both of the types of data sets. So for the state data file, one advantage is that once you have established the sharing agreement with the state agency, the data are accessible anytime. So you can just log into the system and download the most recent updated files. That means that when the data are updated, you have ready access to that data. Another advantage to the state agency data is that if the optional fields are filled in, and we talked about optional fields a little bit already, and one example is the emission unit description. If that information is filled in by the state agency, you get that information imported into your TEISS project, and in the GPR data that might not necessarily be the case. And having that additional information imported into TEISS might give you more insight about the emissions data. One disadvantage of the state data is that it might not be as complete as the GPR data. So because the state data doesn't include any emissions estimates from EPA, there might be some data in the GPR that's not in the state data files. An example of this is airport emissions. So EPA estimates emissions for airports, and most agencies accept these emissions rather than calculating their own airport emissions. So if there are airports in your area, it is likely that the airport emissions are not in the state data files. And this is also true for any non-point sources that the state elected to use EPA estimates for instead of calculating their own emissions. So, for example, if in your area there are county agencies responsible for submitting NEI data to the EPA, the state files might be lacking data for certain counties. If you wanted to include data for that county in your TEISS project, you would have to work with EPA to establish a sharing relationship with that county to obtain that data. So you might need to have multiple sharing relationships to get all the data that you need. And then you would have to import multiple data files into TEISS. GPR data. We've already talked a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages just by talking about the EIS state data files. So one advantage to the GPR data is its complete data, including the EPA estimates. It's a one-stop shop, and there's only going to be one file per data category, meaning one point source file to import. One of the disadvantages to the GPR data is that it might not include data in some of the optional fields. So if a state agency entered data into the optional fields, it might not be in the GPR data because EPA compiled that data and those fields might not have got compiled into it. The demonstration today is on importing your GPR point source data into your TEISS project. And these data files are downloaded from the training site, the EI-Fundamentals training site. And we recommend that you use these data files in your Level 4 Emissions Inventory TEISS project, although you do have the option of using the state data files that I went over in the previous slides. And if you want to do that, you just need to establish an EIS gateway account, and then you need to work with the EPA to develop a sharing relationship with the state agencies or perhaps state agencies. But the presentation today is just going to be on using the GPR data. So what you first need to do is you need to download the NEI files from the EI Fundamentals training site. And where those are located is Module 4, and that module is called the Importing NEI Data into TEISS module. And there is a folder, and it's called Accessing Your NEI GPR Data. That's within that module. So you just need to scroll down until you find that folder, and then click on this folder here to open it up. So within that Accessing Your NEI GPR Data folder, there are a bunch of more folders. And these folders are grouped into individual states or perhaps groups of states. So depending on where your tribe is located, you might be downloading data from multiple folders. So you would open the folder of interest by clicking on the small gray arrow, which is to the left of the folder icon. So you've seen these little small gray arrows. Those are what are going to open up the individual subfolders. Within most of these individual folders, there are even more folder groupings, and there's also a document. So the document you can use to look at and determine what jurisdictions, and most often those are counties, are in each of the data files. So in this particular example, notice here that the Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska folder is open. And you'll see two subfolders within that. You'll see Middle Iowa and Western Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska. So if you need to know what counties are in each of those subfolders, you would click on this list of counties document, and that would list those all out for you. So something to know. So in each of the subfolders, there are 4 data files. One is a point source data file, and that's the file we're going to be talking about during this module. It is a zipped file, and you need to download that file to your computer from the training site. So when you see that point source file, you're going to click on it, and then it's going to say, do you want to open this or do you want to save it? And you need to say, I want to save it. And that usually goes into your downloads folder on your computer. And you also, like I mentioned, might need to download files from multiple folders, depending on if there's counties in the multiple subfolders that you need. After you downloaded that point file, you need to extract it or unzip it. And that because the point source file contains an EIS XML file that's ready to import into TEISS. But first you need to extract it or unzip it in order for TEISS to recognize that EIS XML formatted file. So you need to use any of the common zip extraction software to extract or unzip that file. If there's any questions you have on doing that, or if you need assistance with that, please don't hesitate to contact us. So there's also the 3 spreadsheet files in these subfolders. So there's a non-point spreadsheet file, a non-road spreadsheet file, and an on-road spreadsheet file. And you'll also need to download each of those to your computer as well as the point zipped file. We're not going to be talking much about the non-point, non-road, and on-road data files in this module, but you're going to be using them in the next module, and that is why you need to download those as well. At this point, I'm just going to give you a really short demonstration of the training site so you can see exactly where to find these files on the EI Fundamentals training site. So let's just take a quick look at that. So here is the EI Fundamentals training site, and you want to go down to Module 4 and click on it. So Module 4, Importing NEI Data into TEISS, go ahead and click on that, and then that's going to open up a whole bunch of more files, folders, and the one you want to look for is the Accessing Your NEI GPR Data folder. So go ahead and click on that. And this is what you'll see. So you'll see the state files, or perhaps group of state files. And you want to click on the little gray arrow icon to open those individual subfolders. So let's say that my tribe is located in Oklahoma. So if I have a tribe located in Oklahoma, I'd want to click on this little gray arrow icon to open up that subfolder. And then you'll see, okay, there's 2 more subfolders within that: Middle Oklahoma and Northeast Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri. And if I needed to know what counties were in each of those folders, I would click on this document to look at those. So let's say I need to download data from both of these folders. So I click on the little gray arrow icon, and that shows you the 4 files that I told you about. So here is the non-point, non-road, and on-road spreadsheet. And as I mentioned, those are for the next module. We don't import those into TEISS because they have their own data table analysis function. So they have the ability to look at the data in graphs and tables, and we don't need to import them into TEISS. So we're just going to download those to our computer for now. So you would click on this, the first one in the list, and then it would open up this little pop-up box and it says, what do you want to do with this file? And you want to say, I want to save this file. So if that's not already selected, go ahead and select Save File and click on OK. And that's going to usually go directly to your Downloads folder on your computer. So I'm not going to do that now, but if you were doing that, you would do that process, and you would do that for each of these files. So you click on the on-road and say Save File, then click OK. On-road, same thing, and then point. And this one, look, by default, went to Open with Zip Central, but you want to do Save File. So you do Save File and click OK. And then you would, if you needed to get data in multiple subfolders, you would repeat that process for the next folder that you needed data from. So you do that again for this folder if you needed counties from this folder as well. So that is how you find your data on the EI Fundamentals training site. So let's go back into our slides. And now we're going to talk about how to import your point source data into your TEISS project. So what you first want to do is you want to open the project you started in Module 3 in TEISS. So you would open up TEISS, and then you would either go to File, Open, or you would use this open folder to open your project. The benefit of using file open is that it shows the most, I think it's the most four recent TEISS projects that you've opened. So they're shown in a list. You might be familiar with that with other software programs you use. So you can use that option, or you can use the folder option. And with that, you just have to navigate to where you saved your file. If you don't remember where you saved your file, check your database logbook to make sure to locate the file. If you wrote that down, which you should have written that down in your logbook on where you saved that file, and that will help you out. You can also contact us if you need assistance with opening up your TEISS project. So once you get your TEISS project open, you want to go to this NEI option. So you click on this NEI option, and then you click on the Import from EIS XML option. So after you click on the Import EIS XML option, this is the window you'll see that's shown. So there's different tabs in this window to allow you to import the data for the different categories, such as point, non-road, on-road. And we start with the point data just to show you how that looks. And this just gives you a rundown of how you're going to import that file. So the first step is to check the Import Point Sources box, which is right here. Then you want to use this button that looks like a folder to browse or navigate to where you saved the unzipped point data file. You want to click on the Check Selected Locations button because that allows you to import only one county of the file instead of all the counties included in the file. And this is really important because if you imported all locations, it might take TEISS a long time to do the import. And if you want to do other things on your computer at the same time, those things tend to run slowly, and that can lead to some frustration. So you want to make sure you import only a few counties at a time. And I would suggest not importing more than 2 or 3 counties at a time. Unless you have time, like you're going to lunch and you want to let your computer work, then you can import more counties. But as a general rule, I would not import more than 3 counties at a time. And if you have a county that has an urban center, a city, for example, there is a huge possibility that there is a lot of point sources because cities tend to have lots of point sources. So that might take a lot of time to import that file. So we talked about this. It might take 10 or more minutes depending on your file size and how many counties you're going to import. And as I said, we recommend not importing more than 3 counties at a time, and do not select all location under import options. When TEISS is done importing, you'll get the import successfully completed screen, and that should make you happy because you're done importing data. And you just have to click OK on that,